Live from the Vermont PBS studios, it's Report from Washington. Tonight, Senator Bernie Sanders takes your questions and discusses the day's top issues and how they'll affect us in Vermont. As always, the viewers drive the discussion, so call in or email.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Stuart Ledbetter. Welcome. Tonight, Congress is arguing over new authority for the president to negotiate a potential trade deal with the Pacific. The Iran nuclear agreement is still on the table. A budget agreement is not. The Federal Highway Trust Fund is almost out of money, and a bunch of people are now running for president. So we have some questions tonight for our guest, U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. We hope you have some questions too. Senator Sanders, welcome back to Vermont PBS.
Great to be with you, Stuart. Good
to see you, sir. We, as you heard off the top, invite your calls and your emails for Senator Sanders, who will be here for the hour. We'll get to as many of them as we possibly can, and we've already had some in the queue. But off the top, Senator, let's get to some of the news of the day. We have a new Attorney General tonight.
We do.
And it took a while to get to this point, and I'm wondering if you could fill us in on the backstory.
Well, Stuart, you're right. It took much too long. I think it's not debatable that the delay was caused by Republican obstructionism, and it's part of a long history that has gone on since President Obama has been in office, that if he wants something, they're going to delay it. But at the end of the day, she was passed. She got a number of Republican votes. Senator Leahy was the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, played a very important role in making that happen, and I think it's a good thing. I think we've got a good new Attorney General, and I look forward to working with her.
Do you sense any policy shift at Justice with Loretta Lynch in charge?
At this point, it's too early to say. I don't know the answer to that.
The other piece of news we learned today was the suggestion that Comcast might be backing away from its desire to merge with Time Warner. You've been very critical of this proposal as over antitrust concerns, concentration of power, and so forth. What is your reaction, and do you think it's for real?
Well, if the reports are real, I think Bloomberg made that announcement today, that Comcast is going to walk away from that deal. I think it's very important, and I think it's a very positive step. I worry very much about concentration of ownership in this country in general, in sector after sector, and I especially worry about it in the media. Comcast right now has huge influence over the cable TV industry, as well as broadband. Merging with Time Warner, I think would give them much too much power. I've been very active and vocal in trying to prevent that merger, and I hope that we will be successful in that.
Well, I just saw a report last night that you were one of, I think, 6 members of the Senate to sign a letter the day before expressing your strong opposition to this, along with Senator Franken. And what was surprising is that there were only 6 signing this letter. Why is that?
Well, it's the way it often is here in Washington. Comcast, Time Warner are very, very powerful entities. They make a lot of campaign contributions. They have enormous influence. And sadly, not too many members of Congress are prepared to stand up to them.
You're watching Report from Washington here on Vermont PBS. The phone number to call to get in right now to speak with Senator Sanders and get your question answered is 1-866-424-LIVE, 424-LIVE, or you can email us at connect@vermontpbs.org. And as I said, Senator, we have a couple of questions already in the queue, and let's get to the first. It comes to us from Michael in Winooski, who asks whether you support the Winooski City Council's decision this week to join the federal lawsuit that seeks to reconsider or to get more answers to the basing of the F-35 jet at the Burlington Airport. Senator, why or why not, asks Michael Mahoney of Winooski.
Well, this is an issue we have been around the block on many, many times. The issue is not support for the F-35, opposition to the F-35. The issue is that the F-35 is the plane of the Air Force, of the Navy, of NATO. The question that the delegation and the governor had to deal with is whether or not the F-35, which is the state-of-the-art, will be the state-of-the-art fighter plane, will be stationed in Vermont, or whether it will go to Florida or South Carolina. It's my view that it should be in Vermont. I think it will create and maintain a significant number of jobs and educational opportunities for people in the Vermont National Guard.
Do you have any quarrel with a community, though, seeking some additional answers through the federal courts?
Absolutely not. I mean, people have the right to ask all the questions. And I think the other point that I would make, and as I've made many, many times, is it's very important that the Vermont National Guard cooperate with the community on environmental issues. And there are serious issues. I think we're all concerned about the noise issue. And I have the assurances from the Vermont National Guard that they will work with the communities to do everything they can to alleviate the noise problem.
1-866-424-LIVE if you'd like to get in on the line right now with Senator Sanders. I wanted to play a little clip. You were on the front of the Free Press today after attending a rally outside the Capitol yesterday with a group of federal contract workers, and the issue was the low rate of pay. Let's listen, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
What America is supposed to be about is that if you work 40 hours a week, you earn enough money to take care of your kids and your family. And you can't do that on $7.25 an hour. You can't do it on $9 an hour. You can't do it on $10 an hour. So what we are saying today is pretty simple. That the taxpayers of this country want to make sure that when government contracts are made, those employers who get those contracts pay workers a living wage.
Senator, that rally was also included criticism of this potential 12-nation trade deal. The general theme here is that it's going to stick it to the lower middle-class worker. Where do things stand tonight?
Well, Stuart, let me just comment about that rally. One of the phenomenon that's taking place in this country is that in the last 40 years, we have seen a significant decline in the American middle class, and many people have dropped out of the middle class. They're living in poverty. As you well know, in our state, there are people who work in 2 jobs, 3 jobs, sometimes 4 jobs to cobble together an income and some health care. And what I was saying at the rally is that we have got to raise the minimum wage over a period of years to a living wage. And that what's happening in our country today is that many of the new jobs that are being created are part-time jobs. They are low-wage jobs. They're not jobs that enable people to raise a family with any kind of security. And what that rally was about is saying to the federal government, which has thousands of contracts with private companies, that preference should be given to those companies who pay people a living wage and allow workers to join a union. So that was a very important issue to me. And we are making progress now, I'm proud to say, all over the country, where you're seeing state after state, including the state of Vermont, voting to raise the minimum wage, cities voting to raise the minimum wage. And the goal has got to be, once again, that if somebody works 40 hours a week, they're not living in poverty. It is absurd that in Vermont you have working people who have to go to emergency food shelves because the wages that they earn are so low that they can't adequately feed their family. So raising the minimum wages is very important to me, and let's make it a living wage. Now, the second issue is an issue I've been very actively involved in during the last week, and that is trade policy and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which will be, if passed, the largest trade agreement in the history of our country and encompass something like 40% of the world's economy. And I am very strongly opposed to fast track, which would allow for a process in which there'll simply be an up or down vote on that treaty without any amendments. And I am opposed to the treaty also. And the reason for that is if you look at the history of these unfettered free trade agreements over the last 30 or so years in America, and that's NAFTA, that's CAFTA, that's the trade agreement with China, what you find is very clearly that promises were made that these free trade agreements would create jobs in America, raise wages in America, and the truth has been exactly the opposite. As a result of these free trade agreements, we have lost millions of decent paying jobs. You walk into any department store in the state of Vermont, and where are the products manufactured? They're manufactured overwhelmingly in China, in Vietnam, in other low-wage countries. And the whole purpose of these trade agreements, pushed by corporate America, pushed by Wall Street, was to enable large corporations to say, good, I don't have to pay workers in Vermont 15 or 20 bucks an hour. I can shut down in Vermont, shut down in California, shut down in Detroit, move to China, move to Vietnam, pay people very low wages, and bring the products back into our country. And that is exactly what has happened. So I think this Trans-Pacific Partnership follows on the footsteps of other very bad trade agreements, and I'm going to do everything that I can to defeat it and come up with a trade policy which works for the middle class and working class of America and not just for the large multinational corporations.
Where do you think this stands in the Senate right now? Were there to be a vote?
If there were a vote tomorrow, my guess is that almost all of the Republicans would vote for it, that most Democrats would not vote for it, but that it would win in the Senate. Now, I may be wrong on that, and there's a lot of pressure now being placed on senators, including a lot of Republicans at the grassroots level. You got probably more Republicans at the grassroots level who dislike this unfettered free trade for a number of reasons. I suspect there are more of them than there are Democrats, to be honest with you. But what the Republican members of the Senate and the House have got to deal with is the big money interests, their corporate sponsors, their campaign contributors like this unfettered free trade. A lot of their base does not. They have to decide which way they're going. I suspect they'll go with the big money campaign contributors. Well, in the House, by the way, I think it's going to be a much closer vote. As I understand it, the vast majority of the Democrats are opposed. There are a number of Republicans who are opposed, and we'll see what happens.
I mean, it is from afar a little weird to hear President Obama, who's not regarded as a staunch conservative, going on shows like Chris Matthews on MSNBC, and we're going to play a clip and try to help us understand what's going on here, because he says that folks like you are just plain wrong.
I've spent the last 6.5 years yanking this economy out of the worst recession since the Great Depression. Every single thing I've done, from the Affordable Care Act to pushing to raise the minimum wage, to making sure that young people are able to go to college and get good job training, to what we're pushing now in terms of sick paid leave, everything I do has been focused on how do we make sure the middle class is getting a fair deal. Now, I would not be doing this trade deal if I did not think it was good for the middle class. And when you hear folks make a lot of suggestions about how bad this trade deal is, when you dig into the facts, they are wrong.
So is it a conceptual, a philosophical thing? Is it just the hangover from NAFTA and others, or have we haven't seen the details of this, right?
Well, Stuart, here's where we first start. As a member of the United States Senate, I can walk into a heavily guarded room and I can read the agreement, the proposed agreement. I can read it. I cannot take notes. I'm not allowed to speak about it after I leave the room. I can't bring staff in there who are knowledgeable about this issue. This is highly complicated legal stuff. So you got a highly secretive document that most members are not really familiar with. What we have learned by and large has been leaked. Now, the president, who I have a lot of respect for and agree with on many, many issues, I think he is dead wrong on this issue. And what he has to explain to the American people is how, in any significant and fundamental way, this trade agreement is different than the other trade agreements with China, with Korea, with Mexico, which have cost us millions of jobs. Now, as part of this TPP, it's a 12-nation agreement, and included in those nations are Vietnam and Malaysia, okay? Mm-hmm. In Vietnam right now, the minimum wage is 56 cents an hour. That's the fact. No one can disagree with that. And what we will see if this agreement goes through is increased investment, not in the United States of America, but in Vietnam, where people are paid very, very low wages. In terms of Malaysia, you have a situation where you have a strong electronics industry, and you have a lot of major electronics companies like Dell and others who employ huge numbers of people in Malaysia. It turns out that a lot of the people employed there are immigrants to Malaysia, not native Malaysians, whose passports have been taken away from them, who are working under slave-like conditions. They can't leave the country. They don't have mobility. They don't have any legal rights. They are paid pennies an hour. Should workers in the United States be competing against those workers? The other point that I would make is that you look in this country who is in favor of the agreement. Certainly the president is. So is Wall Street. So is virtually every major multinational corporation. So is the pharmaceutical industry for its own reasons. Do people really think that corporate America is staying up nights worrying about the well-being of workers in Vermont and other states? These are the people who have shut down thousands of plants in America and moved abroad. They like this agreement. There is a reason why they do. Now, I can go on and on about this agreement because it's not just the loss of jobs, it's issues of sovereignty, it's issues of the ability of private corporations to sue governments if they are trying to protect the health and well-being of their people or their environment, and going to an international tribunal. That concerns me very much. It concerns me very much that the pharmaceutical industry will be able to maintain and lengthen their patent times that they have patents, which will prevent poor countries from moving to generic drugs, which will probably cost many, many lives in poor countries where people will not be able to afford expensive medicine. We can go on and on and on. But bottom line is the trade agreements that we have had in this country for the last 30 years, pushed by the big money interests, have failed the American worker. We've lost millions of decent paying jobs. We've been in a race to the bottom where wages have gone down. I do not want to see a continuation of those policies.
So they won't let you take notes or bring in staff. When will we know what's in this thing?
You will see it after if fast track is passed, you will then see it. But the problem then is that once it's part of the fast track law, when the final bill comes before Congress for a vote, you can't amend it. It's simply an up or down vote. And they will have the votes to do that at that point, I suspect.
So 56 cents an hour in Vietnam, I think you said. What should the federal minimum wage be here?
I think we've got to move toward $15 an hour over a period of years, not tomorrow. But over a period of years, we have got to move toward a wage where if somebody works 40 hours a week, they can live at least with a minimum of dignity.
You're watching Report from Washington with U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders, who joins us from Capitol Hill tonight. We invite your calls and questions. Let's go now to East Montpelier. You're on the line tonight with Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank you. The Obama deal with Iran is going to be reviewed by Congress. I'd be interested in hearing your thinking about that.
Okay. I think that the agreement that has recently been worked out makes sense. The fear that I had, based on the letter written by 47 Republicans to the Iranian government, was very clearly, to me, an effort to sabotage this agreement. I think the President and Secretary Kerry are working very hard to accomplish a couple of goals. The first goal is to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon, and that is very, very important. And I think we can all understand why. The second goal, it seems to me, that is equally important is that we do that without getting involved in another war in the Middle East. And it really stuns me to hear some of my Republican friends who seem to have forgotten about the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, wars which have cost us 6,700 men and women their lives, including more than a few in Vermont, wars that have led to hundreds of thousands of brave men and women coming home with PTSD and traumatic brain injury. I'm the former chairman of the Veterans Committee. We looked at that very, very closely. Very sad situation. Wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that will end up costing us between $4 and $6 trillion. So I don't want to see another war. I want to see us do everything that we can to accomplish the goal of preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon without a war. The President, Secretary Kerry are working very hard to do that, and I support those efforts.
Can you envision any circumstance in which you would go to war with Iran to prevent them from acquiring a nuclear weapon?
Well, I think, that is not something that we're going to have to worry about tomorrow. But, let's be clear. You remember when we went to war in Iraq, everyone said, oh, this is going to be, what was Rumsfeld talking about? It's going to be a couple of months. We'll overthrow Saddam Hussein. We'll establish democracy. We'll bring stability to the region, man. No problem at all. Didn't quite turn out that way. We unleashed a can of worms, massive destabilization, and we're in a crisis situation today. Iran is a more powerful nation. You will be fighting an asymmetrical war. We have troops in that region. Iran is a powerful nation. They have a lot of allies. So, Stuart, I think we've got to do everything that we can to prevent another war, not just in Iran, but in that region. I think we've got to work as hard as we can to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, but you have to do that without going to war, if at all possible.
Let's take one of our email questions now from Walter Dodd in North Springfield, Vermont. He asks, Senator, whether you support the bipartisan effort that Congressman Peter Welch is involved in to reform the ethanol fuel blending mandate. Why or why not?
Well, that's a good question. I can't give you a definitive answer. It's something we're studying, but I just don't have the answer for that right now. I think clearly the goal of energy policy in general is, given the crisis, the planetary crisis of climate change, is that we have to move as aggressively as we possibly can to move away from fossil fuel, from coal, oil, other fossil fuel, to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Biofuels, some types of biofuels may work, some types may not be productive for a variety of reasons, but that's an issue that we're still studying. But bottom line, and I've worked very hard on this issue, we have to listen to the scientific community, and we have to work as hard as we can, leading the world away from fossil fuels and into new forms of energy.
Well, I thought that the ethanol was an effort to help corn farmers. What we hear from Congressman Welch here is that it ruins your lawnmower, and it's depresses your gas mileage. And why are we still doing it?
Well, the reason is that it's not oil and it's not coal. That's the reason that I think we are doing it. That's the main reason. Now, whether we can do something better, I think we might, but that's something that I want to think about a little bit more.
Montpelier is talking about maybe implementing, or at least continuing to study, a state carbon tax. The governor does not seem interested in having Vermont take this step alone. You have been outspoken in your support for a national carbon tax. Which is going to come first, you think?
Well, given the fact that we have a major party called the Republican Party, most of whose members refuse to even acknowledge the reality of climate change as caused by human activity and carbon emissions, I don't think you're going to see a carbon tax in the very immediate future. But I, along with Senator Barbara Boxer, did propose just that.
Right.
Look, you have to make a simple decision on this issue, Stuart. Do you believe what the scientists are telling us in overwhelming numbers? And there's no longer a debate in the scientific community. What they say is climate change is real. It is caused by human activity. It is already causing devastating problems in our country and around the world. Look at recently what happened in California, where they're cutting water consumption by 25%. And what the scientists tell us, if we don't act in a reasonably short window of opportunity, we are looking at a planet in which at the end of the century could be 5 to 10 degrees warmer with cataclysmic impact. That means extreme weather, disturbances, drought, floods, mass migrations of people, unbelievable problems for the planet. I believe what the scientists are telling us. I think we've got to be aggressive. I think a carbon tax is one of the right ways to go. But bottom line, we have to transform our energy system. In our small state, we are doing a good job. We can do better, but we're moving aggressively in solar. We're moving aggressively in wind. We are doing a good job in weatherization, energy conservation. We should be doing more, but our whole country should be doing more. And I believe that climate change is, in fact, a planetary crisis, and we have got to be as aggressive as we can be.
Well, do you think it makes much sense to have our tiny little state go it alone, to make a point, to lead by example?
Again, I haven't studied what Montpelier is talking about, but I certainly do believe we should do that at the national level.
Warren, Vermont, you're next with U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders here on Vermont PBS.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Sanders. I just wanted to comment that I feel like a lot of people are on board with you with their fear of the Pacific Trade Agreement. And what can we do? What can the average person do? I know typically they say, write your congressman, but it looks like Congress is pretty well stacked in favor of this. Is there any organized effort going on by the trade unions or anyone where there may be, let's say, a day of protest in Washington or a way for us to stand up against this agreement? Because everyone I talk to does not want it. So what's up
thanks
with that?
very much. To answer your question, there is massive activity all over the country. And every trade union in the country, to the best of my knowledge, is in opposition. I participated in a rally earlier this week with the head of the AFL-CIO, Rich Trumka. And I think you're seeing protests around the country. I would say that the best thing you could do is just get on the phone and email. There are a number of members of Congress who have not yet come out and made it clear as to which side they are on this issue. So I would make sure that you and other folks who are concerned start writing emails and start getting on the phone and put pressure on those members of Congress who have not yet declared. I think what you're seeing here in Washington is the big money interests are all revved up, and we need to let members of Congress know that tens of millions of people do not want to see another disastrous trade agreement.
We have an email tonight from Teresa Perrin DeVille from Wilder, who would like to know, Senator, what are your views on illegal immigrants? She asks, if they've been in this country for many years, have kids who were born in this country, should they automatically receive permanent residency, or should there be some process for that?
I think there's got to be a process. We have apparently some 11 million undocumented people in this country. I voted for legislation that would allow for a path towards citizenship as part of comprehensive immigration reform. I think the idea that some are suggesting that simply on one day or over a period of time you're going to throw 11 million people out of this country, many of whom have lived here for years, they've raised their kids here, their kids were born in this country, makes no sense to me at all. So we need comprehensive immigration reform. The Senate passed that bill last year. The House has refused to take it up, but I hope that they will, and I hope we can pass some significant legislation.
You're watching a report from Washington here on Vermont PBS. Your contact numbers are on the screen, 1-866-424-LIVE, 424-LIVE. You can get right through right now, and you can email us as well. Of course, Senator Sanders has offices both in Washington and in Burlington, and is always has staff who are always happy to hear from you Whether you have a problem or a policy concern, the addresses are also on your screen now.
Stuart, if I could just jump in
Sure.
and amplify what you said. We have a number of great caseworkers, and they are dealing every single day with issues that Vermonters have, whether it's Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid or veterans issues, and they do a great job. So I would urge people to give our office a ring. We're there to help and get the word out to your friends as well.
Well, Senator, we've seen you on some of the national programs, and we have a clip from one of your appearances on Comedy Central from 2 weeks ago, and it's probably going to raise an issue that a lot of Vermonters have been wondering about. Let's roll it, and we also have some polling numbers to ask you about when we come back.
Are you running for president? You can announce it on the Nightly Show, Bernie. Keep it 100.
Let me say this. I am giving very serious thought, and if we can demonstrate that we have a whole lot of people out there willing to stand up and fight, and if we can raise a reasonable amount of money, yeah, I would run for president.
I think that sounds like a yes.
I think it sounds like a yes. They all go crazy. That was 2 weeks ago. You've been giving it serious thought for some time. Where are you going to end up on this?
Well, Stuart, the reason I've been giving it serious thought for some time, and you're quite right, is this is a hugely serious issue. It is serious not only for my life and for my family's life, but it is serious for the political point of view that I have. Look, the people of Vermont know me pretty well. And in the course of my political life, I have taken on virtually every powerful special interest that there is, whether it is Wall Street, whether it's the military-industrial complex, whether it is disastrous trade policies, whether it's pharmaceutical companies, whether it's insurance companies. And when you have an array of political enemies that strong, who have unlimited amounts of money, who can put literally billions of dollars into the political process, before you decide that you want to run for president of the United States of America, you have to make sure that you can run a strong and credible and winning campaign. And why that's important is that if I run on issues which says that, for example, we've got to break up the Wall Street banks that today have unbelievable power, that we have to reverse climate change, that we have to make college affordable and provide free tuition in state colleges and universities, that we need to create millions of jobs by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, that we have to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, that we need a national health care program, health care for all. If I carry that banner, which is supported by millions of people, and I don't run a good campaign, then our opponents will say, Sanders was worried about income and wealth inequality. Well, nobody in America really paid much attention. Sanders was worried about high unemployment, but apparently the American people don't believe that. So the campaign is not just about my ego. It's about doing well, making a serious effort to win, understanding that one starts off as a real underdog. So it has to be done well, and it's not so easy to come up with a conclusion as to whether it can be done well. So there are two basic issues. I will be taking on, if I do run, people who literally will have billions of dollars because of this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. The Koch brothers will probably end up spending $1 billion alone, not to mention all the other billionaires out there. How do you raise, not billions, but at least a few $100 million from small campaign contributors, which is how I've always raised most of my money running in Vermont? Can you do that nationally? Stuart, if I were to raise 3 million contributions of $100 each, that would be 1/3 of what the Koch brothers themselves are going to spend in this election cycle. So can you raise the money? That's a real question. We're trying to figure that out. And second of all, is there the political support in America, not just to vote for Bernie Sanders, but to wage an unprecedented grassroots campaign which says that we are prepared to take on the billionaire class, which has so much power over our economy and our political life? Are the American people prepared to do that? And you know what, Stuart? I'm still trying to figure that out. There is a lot of support for the agenda that I have. That I know. But are people prepared to roll up their sleeves and really get invested heavily in a door-to-door grassroots campaign? We also have to determine that. But having said all of that, I will be making that decision in the near future.
Near future. This month?
Stuart, give me a break. In the near future.
You've laid out 15 policy reasons to run. Do you personally want to do this badly?
That's a good question, and let me be very honest with the people of Vermont who know me. I do not wake up in the morning saying I have some burning desire to want to be President of the United States. I do not. I am so proud to be the senator from the state of Vermont, the longest serving independent in the history of the United States Congress. I love my job, so I have no burning desire. Some people who are incredibly ambitious, they wake up and when they're 10 years old, they decide they want to be president. That is absolutely not me. I think people who know the way that my political history know, it is the most unconventional history of any member of the United States Senate. I ran and got 2% of the vote back in 1971, and then I got 1% of the vote. It has been a long, strange political history. So I do not wake up saying I, have got to be president. But this is what I do wake up and feel very strongly about. As the father of 4 and the grandfather of 7. Stuart, this is a pivotal moment in the history of our country. For 40 years, the American middle class has been in decline, and we are now seeing a situation where 99% of all new income generated now is going to the top 1%. The top 1/10 of 1% owns as much wealth as the bottom 90%. One family, the Walton family, owns more wealth than the bottom 42% of the American people. And as a result of Citizens United, big money is now in a position to literally buy the United States government. And all of that upsets me very, very much. My father came to this country at the age of 17 without a nickel in his pocket. He never made any money, but he was able to send his 2 sons to college. That was a pretty big deal. And I am extremely concerned that that American dream is disappearing, that the rich will continue to get much richer and everybody else will get poorer. So what is needed is a campaign which says enough is enough. The billionaires can't have it all. We are the wealthiest country in the history of the world, but the rich can't just have everything. That the middle class deserves a break, that we have got to address poverty issues, healthcare issues effectively as well. That is what motivates me, Stuart. And if I run, that will be the reason why.
You've been to Iowa and New Hampshire repeatedly. You've been to a number of states. You've been to the Deep South. We have some new polling, public policy polling among New Hampshire Democratic voters. And it found that, Senator Clinton, Secretary Clinton is out front, and not a big surprise. And Elizabeth Warren from next door in New Hampshire, in Massachusetts, is number 2. And then this guy named Sanders is in double digits in New Hampshire among likely Democrats. You're ahead of Vice President Biden. What does that tell you? Does that give you comfort and encouragement?
It does, Stuart, in this sense. And there was just a national poll coming out today, I believe, by Quinnipiac, which had me at 8%. That may not seem like a lot. Biden was at 10%, 95%, and Hillary was way out in front. The vice president, for example, is known by 95% of the American people. Bernie Sanders nationally is known by 40-50% of the American people. And I'm not certainly, not a, well-known national figure. Most people don't know what I stand for. But I think the polling that we have seen in New Hampshire, where, on the other side of the state, a lot of people don't know who I am. I think that's a pretty good poll. And I think that if we got into this race, if we were able to run the kind of aggressive grassroots campaign that I would try to run, I think we'd have a shot to do pretty well in New Hampshire. I was to Ohio, and a lot of support out there. We held meetings. I was in, and the thing I love about Iowa, by the way, it is very much like the state of Vermont. And I felt very comfortable doing the same kinds of town meetings that I've done hundreds of times in Vermont. We did them in Iowa, same thing. And you got a lot of people coming out who are very down-to-earth people, just, ordinary working people coming out, asking great questions. We had a lot of young people coming out. We had a meeting in Des Moines, Iowa. We had like 450 people coming out, which is a very, very big turnout there. So it seems to me there's good support there as well. So the issue comes down to the fact that I believe there is support for the agenda. People can't understand why they have to work longer hours for low wages, why their kids may have a lower standard of living than they do, and all of the money is going to the top 1%. Doesn't make a lot of sense to people. So I think we have a message that can work. But how in this day and age, where there's so much money in the political process, can we run an effective campaign? And that's the issue that I'm struggling with right now. But we will have a decision in the reasonably near future.
You suggested 300. You threw out the $300 million figure a while back. Is that what you'd need to be? I mean, there's no guarantee, but is that a number that makes sense to you?
Stuart, if I ran for president of the United States and raised $300 million, it's an unbelievable amount of money for me.
Sure.
In Vermont, we raised $6 million. To raise $300 million is just a huge sum of money. I would, in all likelihood, get outspent 5-1. And on top of that, there would be probably a lot of super PACs pouring huge amounts of money in. This is the issue, Stuart, and I don't mean to over-dramatize it, because it has nothing to do with me. The real issue now is whether it is possible in today's political climate for a candidate who doesn't have a whole lot of money, who tries to represent working families, can that candidate successfully defeat the billionaire class? And it's not for sure that that can happen. It may be that the deck is so stacked right now for the moneyed interest that they have the capability of buying elections. And that is a very sad state of affairs.
Mrs. Clinton was in New Hampshire this week, as you know, and she got an unbelievable amount of media attention. And I was at an event last night, and at the dinner table, people said, she needs someone to talk with in the primary part. Maybe that's where Senator Sanders and Governor O'Malley and others. I mean, we can't have a coronation, or she doesn't want there to be. Do you think you could fulfill a purpose if for nothing more than that? I mean, to have a good conversation in the primary stage.
Well, Stuart, when I was a young man a few years ago, I ran for the U.S. Senate in 1971, and I ran for governor in 1972, and I ran a few other times. And, we had a few $100s in the campaign, and, no one thought that we could win. We ran good educational campaigns. That was the purpose. And I respect people. No matter what they're, getting involved in politics, whether you're a conservative or progressive, it's not easy. And I respect anybody who's willing to throw their hat into the ring. And I respect people who know they're not going to win, but just want to raise the issues. But I think if I decided to run, it would not just be an educational campaign. It would be to win. Obviously, the camp issues that I would be running on, I would hope would educate the American people. For example, I just said this on the floor of the Senate today. We talked earlier about this Trans-Pacific Partnership, the largest trade agreement in the history of the United States. Stuart, to the best of my knowledge, do you know how much time ABC, CBS, and NBC and CNN have devoted to the TPP? Do you know how much time they have spent discussing the issue?
I'm sure not very much.
To the best of my knowledge, though it may have changed, zero. PBS had a few mentions of it, a little bit of discussion. MSNBC with Ed Schultz actually has discussed this issue. Almost no discussion in the media about the most important issue facing America. Not the, one of the major important economic issues. In terms of climate change, last year I had to write a letter along with other senators to ABC, CBS, and NBC saying, you know what, guys, maybe you might want to be discussing the major planetary crisis according to the scientific community, because they weren't discussing it. So if your question is, getting involved in the campaign will raise issues, will educate the American people, that would be the case. But the goal of that would be to win an election, to bring millions of people together, to stand up and fight for fundamental economic and political change in our country.
Do you think Mrs. Clinton is beatable?
I think anybody is beatable, and I agree with the point you made a moment ago. I think certainly most Americans do not believe that in our country we should have coronations. We should have serious debates about serious issues. As I think you may know, and I hope many Vermonters know, I have run for office a number of times. I have never run one negative ad. No opponent of mine has received a negative ad that I ran. And the reason I don't run negative ads is they disgust me. I don't like them. And by the way, in a state like ours, I don't think that they work, because people have run these terrible negative ads against me. God knows what it is. They did not work terribly well. So if I run against Hillary Clinton, by the way, I should tell you, I have known Hillary Clinton for many, many years. I knew her as First Lady. I knew her obviously as a colleague in the Senate. This is a woman who is extremely intelligent, has an enormous amount of experience, somebody I respect a whole lot. But I will disagree with her if I run on a number of issues. And the goal of democracy is to have a civil debate on the real issues and let the American people make their decision as to whose ideas they agree with more. You asked me, do I think Hillary Clinton can be defeated? Yes, I do. I think that any candidate can be defeated if there are other candidates who are raising issues that the American people agree with.
You're watching Report from Washington here on Vermont PBS. Of course, we've been chatting about the potential presidential campaign ahead for Senator Sanders. You still have some time to get in. We have about eight or nine more minutes. 866-424-LIVE. I believe we still have Tim on the line from Essex. Go ahead, sir. You're on with Senator Sanders.
Thank you for taking my call. First off, Senator, I want to thank you for holding Republicans' feet to the fire when it comes to climate change, because it certainly needs to happen. My question is two parts. One, can we really take Obama seriously when he still rubber stamps fracking, especially fracking on public lands? It seems like the administration never answered any questions about fracking, including Gina McCarthy. And my next question is, can a climate change denier actually win the White House, do you think? Or do you think Republicans are eventually going to have to cave on this issue, and our Democrats are going to make it an issue?
Thank you.
Well, Tim, let me give you the bad news, and I'll give you the good news. The bad news is that the vast majority of the Republicans in the United States Senate and in the House hold the position that A, climate change does not exist at all, or if it does exist, it has nothing to do with human activity. And as you know, virtually the entire scientific community, the people who study this issue, have a very different point of view. You ask me, can a climate change denier win? The answer is I suspect it is possible that he or she could win. Remember, behind them, they will have ExxonMobil and all of the big energy companies. They will have the Koch brothers, who are one of the major funding streams for the deniers, behind them as well. And money talks in American politics. But I will tell you this, honest people can have disagreements on any and every issue. That's called democracy. But when you have a major political party literally rejecting science and what the overwhelming majority of scientists say on the most important global environmental issue, it is pretty frightening.
Senator, we have a couple more emails coming in as well, and John Dostal doesn't think you've addressed international issues sufficiently. He wanted to know about your view on the ongoing terrorist threat and Islamic State. It's not more specific than that, but don't know if you want to address, John.
Well, John, here's my view, and thanks for asking, because that's a huge issue. There is no denying that ISIS is a barbaric organization and that they must be defeated. On the other hand, let me be very clear, I will do my best to see that the United States does not get involved in perpetual warfare in the Middle East. I found it ironic that a month or two ago, the leaders in Saudi Arabia wrote to the President of the United States and they said, we want you to send ground troops into Iraq and into the region to take on ISIS. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia has the third largest defense budget in the entire world and has a military far, far, far stronger than ISIS. So my view is that at the end of the day, the way that ISIS will be defeated is when countries in the region, and that is Saudi Arabia, that is Iraq, that is Syria, that is Qatar, that is the United Arab Emirates, when these countries lead the effort, we should be supportive. And I support airstrikes and targeted missions. But I do not think it is a good thing for this country to be involved in never-ending war in the Middle East. We have an infrastructure which is collapsing. We don't have enough money to rebuild our roads and bridges and put people to work. Our rail system, young people can't afford to go to college. We don't have enough money to help them make college affordable. The Republicans are cutting nutrition programs for pregnant, low-income women. We don't have enough money to do that, but we do have enough money to engage in perpetual warfare. So I want to see ISIS defeated, but the leadership in that effort has got to come from the Muslim countries in that region. This is a war for the soul of Islam. And those countries who hate ISIS as they should have got to step up to the plate and lead the effort.
Senator, do you have any problem with the Clintons accepting money from Saudi Arabia for their foundation?
I don't want to get into an anti-Clinton business today. You know, I haven't studied the Clinton Foundation. The Clinton Foundation has done some very good work. I honestly haven't studied where they have gotten all of their money, how it impacts decisions that the Clintons have made. So I'm not going to give you a good answer. I just don't know enough about that.
Fair enough. You mentioned just a moment ago about our domestic infrastructure needs, and Alice Seymour from Winooski asks a question that people in Montpelier were asking today. You know, the Federal Highway Trust Fund is almost out of money. We don't know if the state's going to suffer if there is no agreement. What is the solution here in your view?
It is unbelievable. It really is unbelievable, because if this drags on, it's going to be too late for us to fund the construction season. You know, there are construction companies out there want to know if they're going to get bids. There's going to be a bidding process at the statewide level. This is going on all over the country. And your question is absolutely right. And the gentleman from Winooski is absolutely right. This is a huge issue. I have proposed $1 trillion to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure over the next 5 years, which only goes part of the way as to where we have to go. So there's no question, but we have to fill the Highway Trust Fund. There are ways to do that. Right now, we're losing $110 billion every single year from corporations who stash their money in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda and in other tax havens, and in some cases do not pay a nickel in federal income taxes. There are ways that we can raise revenue, that we can put into a highway trust fund, that we can rebuild not only our roads and bridges, but our airports and rail and water systems. And by the way, when we do that, we make America not only more efficient and productive, we also create millions of decent paying jobs. This is a huge issue, and I'm going to work as hard as I can to make sure that we get money out to the states so they can start working on the projects that they have.
Usually when Congress can't agree, they simply pass a continuing resolution, or they'll appropriate the same level of funding of the previous year. This has been going on in the Highway Trust Fund for 10 years or more. Is that what's likely to happen this time?
Well, I tell you, Stuart, these are not the good old days. I mean, the world is different with the Tea Party folks in control over the House and the Senate. And the problem often is they refuse to raise new revenue. They refuse to do away with any of these corporate loopholes. They refuse to allow, to ask their billionaire friends to pay a nickel more in taxes. And the only way they want to put money into one pot is by taking it away from another pot. So they say, okay, we'll put money into the trust fund, but we'll take money away from Medicare, or we'll take money away from higher education. Their budget, I'm the ranking member of the Budget Committee, cut $90 billion in Pell Grants. That's the major source of federal funding for kids going to college. They cut huge amounts of money in nutrition. They threw 27 million Americans off of health care. That's the only what they will destroy one program to help another program, and we're not going to allow that to happen. So the issue here is whether or not they're going to ask some of their millionaire friends to pay a little bit more in taxes or come up with other ways to raise revenue for the trust fund.
You'll be 74 this year. I think that's right. Some of us wouldn't believe it, but there you go. You know, some guys dote on the grandkids, go out and play golf, and you're talking about an enormous challenge, an enormous commitment, an expenditure of energy, to say nothing of money, but energy. You sound ready to go.
Well, let me say I dote on my grandchildren, too. Nobody dotes more than I do. I have 7 beautiful grandchildren, and I am a big doter. Thank God I have been very fortunate, Stuart, in my health.
Yeah.
And I think if you ask my staff, they will tell you that, you know, I work pretty hard. And I, you know, as I contemplate this big decision, I would not undertake it unless I thought I had the health and the energy to do it well. You're right. I mean, running around the country and working 18 hours a day is not an easy task for anybody.
Well, I got to stop you there because we're out of time, but we look forward to your decision, and we thank you for being with us tonight. From all of us here at Vermont PBS, our thanks to you at home as well. And tomorrow night, Vermont This Week at 7:30. We'll see you then. Good night.